the travails of Chief Dan Etete and the marginalization of Niger Deltans. The very first question to ask is, what crime did Chief Dan Etete commit? We ask this question because it is increasingly becoming obvious that Dan Etete's only crime is being born an Ijaw man, a minority from the Niger Delta part of Nigeria. As a people, we have allowed our son to stand alone for too long, hoping that the Nigerian government will do what is right. But that seems to be a tall dream, and so we consider this the right time to invite the international community and indeed the rest of Nigerians who are not part of the cabal to hear the raw truth about Malabu's OPL 245 and judge for themselves. The actions of the federal government so far has continued to defy logic, legality, sincerity of purpose, equity, and good conscience. But, as rather pictured, the government as a sect which seeks to kill and destroy people from other parts of Nigeria, and thereby undermining the unity which we have enjoyed over time, as well as jeopardize the oneness of nationhood which we swore. The truth about the sale of OPL 245 belonging to Malabu Oil and Gas has been kept away from the entire world, but like all truths, it is simple and straightforward and not as complicated as the government is making it seem just to deceive the world. OPL 245 was issued to Malabu Oil and Gas Limited during the regime of late General Sani Abacha and has passed through several heads of state as well as presidents in Nigeria without being found wanting for anything whatsoever. Some of the Nigerian leaders who had supervised the activities of OPL 245 include General Abdulsalami Abubakar, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, and Dr. Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. Of all the past leaders, only Olusegun Obasanjo, who out of overbearing pressure from Shell made an attempt in revoking the ownership of OPL 245 from Malabu Oil and Gas Limited as to pass it on to Shell through the back door. This attempt failed because Malabu Oil and Gas Limited put up a very strong resistance and presented documentation which established ownership beyond reasonable doubt, which forced President Obasanjo to heed to the reasoning and return the blocks to Malabu, and even went further to issue the actual operational license to Malabu. At the point when it became abundantly clear that ownership of OPL 245 is not in any way disputed and that it totally belongs to Malabu Oil and Gas Limited, the Royal Dutch company Shell and the Italian oil giant Eni approached Chief Dan Etete, who acted as consultant to Malabu Oil and Gas, to sell the oil block to them. It must be stated for the records that the quest by Shell and Eni for the purchase of the block started during the period of President Obasanjo and lingered, but was finally sealed through the administration of Dr. Goodluck Jonathan, for which Shell and Eni jointly offered to pay $1.1 billion for the block and a signature bonus of $210 million to the federal government of Nigeria, bringing up the entire total of the transaction to about $1.3 billion. It is important to also mention, however, that before the sale of OPL 245, Malabu Oil had equally defeated the late General Sani Abacha's family over claims of the block, and those who feel that they are born to own oil blocks haven't been particularly happy with this development and went ahead to promise that Chief Dan Etete will never have peace. It is equally instructive for the world to know that Nigerians at all levels are in solidarity with Dan Etete, as they are of the opinion that Etete is only being persecuted because he is of a minority tribe in Nigeria, especially as Niger Deltans are seen as not being qualified to own oil blocks. Meanwhile, They are the actual owners and hosts of all the blocks in the country, yet only people of the northern extraction use their influence in government to allocate all the oil blocks in the country to themselves, whereas virtually all of them don't even know the locations of the blocks they claim to own. The interesting aspect of all this is that a good number of northerners are equally holding the view that the persecution against Danny Tete is because the Abacha family failed in their attempt to take over the block from Malabu Oil and Gas. The question that has continued to beg for answer is, what offense did Danny Tete commit by consulting for Malabu Oil and Gas in disposing of OPL 245, especially when the entire process of sale was midwifed by the federal government of Nigeria and managed by the Attorney General of the Federation, being the chief law officer of the nation and ensuring compliance to all extant laws. We have continued to wonder, what crime did our son commit that Buhari has continued to witch hunt him when it is clear that he was not involved in any wrongdoing, especially as the OPL 245 transaction has been reported to be clean by several national and international authorities, such as 2 separate court rulings in Nigeria. The Federal High Court in Abuja exonerated all the parties in the OPL 245 sale as not having done anything outside the law. In the case between Mohammed Bello Adoke versus Economic and Financial Crimes Commission (EFCC), a federal government of Nigeria, the court ruled that everything about the sale of OPL 245 was done in line with the provisions of the Constitution. In the case between Economic and Financial Crimes Commission (EFCC) versus Shell and Eni, the court further ruled thus: this was purely a commercial transaction, and no forfeiture of any asset is recommended. We are sure that Nigerians will not be surprised that despite these court rulings, the federal government has blindly continued its witch hunt of Danny Tete. This is so because the Buhari administration is on record the most lawless in the history of Nigeria. It will interest the international community to know that the United States of America Central Intelligence Agency (CIA) used 13 good months to investigate the sale of OPL 245 and reported that it was a clean transaction. Even the Metropolitan Police in London spent 10 solid months to investigate money laundering, theft, and corruption, but in their report they said as long as the federal government has collected their signature bonus of $210 million, the transaction has been legalized. Ruling on a Malabu OPL 245 matter, Honorable Justice Eddies of the London Crown Court, United Kingdom, stated clearly that there was no money laundering or corruption in the sale of OPL 245. Honorable Justice Steele, also of Crown Court in London, United Kingdom, similarly ruled that there is no corruption, no money laundering traces in the transaction for the sale of OPL 245. What else does the world have to do for Buhari to leave Dan Tete alone? This transaction, OPL 245, which the Nigerian government has used to cause embarrassment to Chief Dan Tete all over the world, is one which was marked and awarded on a sole risk basis, which means that once the government gets its signature bonus, it no longer has legal rights whatsoever on that concession. This position is made evidently clear by the provisions of the Petroleum Act. We must continue to emphasize that the federal government already took its signature bonus of $210 million, and this fact is known to all. Moreover, no part of that transaction was done in secret, as everything was done under the watchful eyes of the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. He gave approval to every single I that was dotted and every single T that was crossed. Where then did Chief Tete go wrong to warrant such dehumanizing treatment from a Fulani cabal that has declared war against all Christians in the country? It has continued to beat the imagination of all and sundry that the federal government will be so irresponsible and insensitive to go after those who participated in a transaction that it superintended over. In case you have been asking yourself, why all the hate from Buhari to Dan Etete? This is nothing but deep-rooted hate. Now hear the truth, that apart from the normal hatred of the Hausa Fulani towards the Niger Delta people, Buhari has a personal hatred for Dan Etete because around the year 1995, Chief Dan Etete, as Minister of Petroleum, openly abused General Muhammadu Buhari, who was then the Executive Chairman of Petroleum Trust Fund (PTF), an agency under the Petroleum Ministry, by calling him the most irresponsible general in Nigeria, adding that Buhari was introducing mediocrity in his ministry. This abuse was right in the presence of the then head of state, General Sani Abacha, as well as late Professor Aluko and two other vice-chancellors of university. This incident occurred at an economic caucus meeting. Now, Buhari wants to pay back at all costs. This is why Dan Etete has been under Buhari's radar since he became president of Nigeria, and it is public knowledge that Buhari is the most vindictive person on the face of the earth. What is even more worrisome in all of this, which clearly show a vendetta and clear hatred for Chief Dan Etete, for which the world must know about, is the fact that the incumbent Attorney General of the Federation, Mr. Abubakar Malami, upon a careful study of the file and documentation of OPL 245 transaction, concluded that there was no fraud in the entire transaction and seriously advised against the revocation of the deal. And not only that, his petroleum counterpart, Dr. Ibe Kachuku, Minister of State for Petroleum, also said he couldn't find any wrongdoing in the transaction. But just because the Attorney General of the Federation and the acting chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, in person of Mr. Ibrahim Magu, are not in best of terms, and as such, the EFCC totally undermined the legal opinion of the Chief Law Officer of the Federation and decided to go on a frolic of discovery, wasting taxpayers' resources in a white elephant chase just to demonstrate that he cannot be controlled by the Attorney General. The world can clearly see that the person of Dan Etete is being made to pay for a serious superiority battle between two Justice Department officers of the Nigerian government under the watch of the President. It may interest Nigerians and indeed the world to know that the Royal Dutch Shell has openly accused the government of Nigeria of hiding key reports of the investigations by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, which concluded that there was no fraud in the sale of OPL 245. This accusation was done in an open court, an English High Court in London, where Shell and Eni are challenging a suit filed against them by the federal government of Nigeria. It is on record that two separate EFCC investigations in 2012 reportedly concluded that there was no corruption in the sale and purchase of OPL 245. All these and more paints a clear picture of a deliberate witch hunt and a clear display of vendetta that seems to be pitching the Nigerian government against the people of the Niger Delta. Pure hate for Chief Dan Etete in particular and the Niger Delta people in general has led the government of Nigeria to spend millions of taxpayers' money pursuing cases against Shell and Eni in an English High Court in London, knowing fully well of a subsisting case in Italy. In fact, by Article 30 of the European Union, the case in London should be stayed until the final determination of the one in Italy. The court is soon to throw that matter away and thereby throwing millions already spent by the Nigerian government into the drain. Lord Goldsmith, the lawyer to Shell, already mentioned to the court that Nigerian presentation to the London court is positively and seriously misleading. Now, this speaks volume about the government of Nigeria and gives a wrong impression about the reputation of Nigeria. Nigerian government is embarking on a mission impossible, as it has a shameful agenda which they consider a high-profile secret, which is however already known to the generality of Nigerians, and it is important for the international community to equally know that the federal government of Nigeria is simply creating a situation where it can nullify the sale of Malabu's OPL 245 and subsequently revoke the license only to reallocate it to someone from the northern extraction. We want Nigerians and especially the international community to be the judge and review this matter now that they have some information and also knowing the agenda of the government of Nigeria. Let us ask ourselves a few questions. If none of the parties to the transaction, which is purely commercial in nature as stated by the Federal High Court, made any official complaint to the government of Nigeria, why then is this unwanted interference, even as the government was not shortchanged in any way? Now let the world be the judge. The ownership of Malabu's oil block OPL 245 at the point of sale and even after was not in contention. Those who bought the oil block did not lodge any sort of complaint as regards irregularity arising from the sale of the said OPL 245. The federal government also received its signature bonus in the sum of $210 million, which was the amount due it. The out-of-court settlement between the federal government of Nigeria, Shell, Eni, and Malabu was said to have saved the government about $3 billion lawsuit. Malabu also received its money via federal government, which was paid in an escrow pending the relinquishing of legal rights from OPL 245. The imperative questions are: why does the government want to nullify the sale? Why do they want to revoke the oil block from the rightful owner? Who do they want to reallocate the block to? Are Niger Delta people, who are the actual owners of the oil-bearing communities, not entitled to own oil blocks? Must all the oil blocks in the country be owned by people from the north? Assuming but not conceding that the block was sold for far less its value, one may have to remind the world that in 2001, when President Obasanjo called Malabu's license and held public auction for the block, Shell was among the highest bidders, as they made a bid for $210 million, an amount which was $150 million higher than the bid of ExxonMobil. So then what could be the concern of the government? The story now is that they want to confiscate a private jet which according to them belongs to Danetete. We call on Tibit Limited, operators of the private jet, to do everything in their powers to fight this oppression and protect their property and even counterclaim against the government to make them have some sense. Young people and groups in the Niger Delta have had it up to their neck with Buhari's administration and are clear on the fact that this issue may just be the last straw that will break the camel's back. Plans for full-blown rallies and protests to draw the attention of the international community over the prosecution of our son Chief Danetete, who has clearly committed no known crime, is already underway, because in this same country other